What is going on, Solo fam? My name is John Solo, and you are witnessing the return of the king. Not really, it's more like the return of the court jester. Cousin. But the point is, it's been a while since our last episode of Messed Up Origins, and I think the intermittent breaks I've had to take all summer are finally over. I just moved back to Illinois, hence the new background, and while this isn't where I'm permanently setting up shop, it is where I'll be filming the next few weeks as I look for my own place and set up a new studio. Anyway, welcome to Mythology Explained. Today I'm breaking down the mythos of an ancient Greek deity that sounds like he'd be a lot tougher than he actually was, Ares, the god of war. Now, there's many places where you may have come across Ares. He's a recurring character in the Percy Jackson books, briefly featured in Disney's Hercules, and the main antagonist in the first God of War game. If you're like me and got your impression of Ares from those places or films like Immortals and Wrath of the Titans, you've probably got him built up in your head as this all-powerful juggernaut of a god. And while I'm definitely not saying Ares wasn't intimidating to the mortal man, I was very surprised to learn in my research that compared to the other gods, he got clowned on quite a bit. Now, the reasons for it actually make sense when you take certain aspects of Greek culture into consideration, but we'll get into all of that later in this episode. First, I want to tell you more about where Ares came from, his temperament, and the numerous scuffles he got himself mixed up in. Before we get started, don't forget to impale that like button just like Ares would want you to, and subscribe to have more mythological content delivered to your sub box on a regular basis. So Ares is one of the many children of the king and queen Olympians Zeus and Hera, and as mentioned earlier, he's the god of war, specifically its most brutal elements. He was often thought of as the personification of war's destructive capacity, as well as the violence, bloodshed, and loss that went along with it. He was given many monikers by the ancient Greeks to reflect this, such as the Bane of Mortals, the Slayer of Men, the City Stormer, the Armor-Clattering, and the Arm-Bearing. Conversely, Ares' sister Athena was the goddess of war and represented a few of its more respectable elements, like military strategy and leadership. Why did the Greeks feel the need to divide the god of war into two separate beings? Well, that's also part of what we're getting to later, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Now, appropriately, the ancient Greeks usually portrayed Ares wearing a helmet, holding a shield, wielding either a sword or a spear, and riding in a golden chariot, a common trend among the Greek gods. He also had an entourage of other powerful beings that accompanied him on the battlefield. Deimos and Phobos, who represent panic and fear respectively, Eris, the goddess of disagreement, Enyo, his sister wife known for orchestrating the destruction of cities, and Sidemus, the personification of the confusion and disorder of battle, making Turtle and Johnny Drama look pretty lackluster in comparison. If you watched the last episode of Mythology Explained, you probably remember me mentioning Aphrodite's affair with Ares and how, in total, he and her spawned 8 children, 2 of which being the previously mentioned Phobos and Deimos. Well, as is the case with most of the Greek gods and goddesses, Ares had a difficult time keeping it in his pants. In total, he may have sired 72 children and possibly more with both gods and mortals. Some of his most notable children were Nike, the goddess of victory, Diomedes, who Heracles fed to man-eating horses during his 8th labor, and all of the Amazons, a tribe of warrior women whom Heracles also killed several of during his 9th labor. As you might expect, Ares wasn't a big fan of Heracles. With a title like the God of War, you'd think there'd be a ton of crazy myths about Ares where he uses his godly powers to conquer other beings and cause all kinds of destruction, but that's actually not the case. Despite him being known as the personification of the brutalities of war and being a terrifying presence when on the battlefield, he ends up being brutally embarrassed in most of the myths he's featured in. As we all know, his affair with Aphrodite culminated into them being trapped under a net and made fun of by the other Olympians, but another good example is his run-in with the underworld giants, Otis and Ephialtes. The giants both grew at an alarming rate, 9 fingers a month to be exact, and they would often boast that they would eventually grow to the heavens and kidnap Artemis and Hera to be their wives. Well, when that day finally came, they were unsuccessful in their siege of Mount Olympus, but they managed to capture Ares in chains and trap him in a bronze jar where he remained helpless for a total of 13 months. The god screamed and howled in anger that entire time, and fun fact, it said that Ares' war cry resembled the cries of 10,000 Spartan soldiers, which I'm sure sounded just lovely in the acoustics of that bronze jar. According to Homer's Iliad, that would have been the end of Ares and his appetite for war if the beautiful Arabia, the young giant stepmother, had not told Hermes what they had done. Which, sidebar, is a pretty hilarious way for 2 giants to get caught. It sounds like a mythological version of a Malcolm in the Middle storyline. Depending on what version of the myth you read, either Hermes was able to fly in and covertly help Ares Ares escape, or Artemis showed up to save the day, and the way she did it was pretty amazing. She visited the giants and promised herself to Otis, causing Ephialtes to get jealous and a fight to break out between the two. Then she transformed herself into a deer and jumped between them. Because they didn't want her to escape, they both threw their spears at her, but she moved out of the way at the last second, resulting in the brothers impaling and killing each other. So as you can see, despite Ares' immense strength, he still fell short of saving himself and required the help of someone clever like Artemis to save him. In another myth, Ares and his son Cycnus, who was known for being a bloodthirsty and malevolent being who tried to build a temple for himself out of the bones of innocent travelers, challenge Heracles to a fight, and Cycnus is immediately stabbed in the neck with a spear. This causes Ares to rage and throw his own spear at Heracles, but thanks to Athena's intervention, it flies right past him. Heracles then stabs Ares in the leg with his own spear, which causes him so much pain he has to be rescued by his sons Deimos and Phobos. Something similar actually happens during the Trojan War too. See, despite Zeus specifically ordering the gods to not intervene in the conflict, Ares showed up on the battlefield to fight alongside the Trojans, all because Aphrodite wanted him to. While Athena encouraged the Greek hero Diomedes, not Ares' son obviously, despite them having the same name, to attack the god and helped him deliver a piercing strike with his spear that caused Ares so much pain he again retreated to Mount Olympus, causing the Trojans to lose the battle. Sometime after, Ares' son Ascalaphus was killed in a different battle, and he tried to switch teams to get revenge on the Trojans. So he essentially told Aphrodite, "Sorry babe, but you played a big role in starting this mess, and it resulted in my son getting killed, so I'm with them now." Unfortunately for him, Athena wouldn't allow him to interfere on the battlefield per Zeus's orders. Years later, when Zeus finally did allow the Olympians to get involved, Ares' first move was to try and get his revenge on Athena for the earlier assault and preventing him from fighting with the Greeks. But she easily overpowered him by smashing him with a giant boulder. Another swing and a miss for the god of war. So as you can see from these stories, the Greeks didn't think very highly of Ares, and their worship of him, or lack thereof, is a testament to that. Unlike the other gods we've done deep dives into, there were very few temples and cults created in his honor. That is, outside of the Spartans, who saw Ares as an ideal soldier and had a statue of him chained up outside their city to show the spirit of victory was being kept there. This is all in contrast to Athena, who was venerated throughout the entire country. In addition to being the goddess of war, she was also the goddess of wisdom, and she used her supreme intelligence to advise great heroes like Hercules and Odysseus on their quests. But that brings us to our earlier question, why the distinction? Why did the Greeks feel the need to divide the god of war into two separate beings with completely different temperaments? And why did they praise one while bashing the other? Well, to answer those questions, we actually have to look at the Roman god of war, Mars, who the Romans viewed in a similar light as the Greeks viewed Athena. They highly valued their military and, as a result, highly valued Mars. Now, while there were some Greek cities like Sparta, which also placed a heavy emphasis on their military, the Greeks mostly valued pursuits of the mind, which great philosophers like Socrates and Plato serve as a testament to. Experts believe the society's different perspective on war gave them a different perspective on the gods. And while the Greeks recognized the value in certain aspects of battle, like military strategy and generalship, there was also some undeniable horrors, like violence, terror, and loss of life. This likely resulted in them creating the two gods, Ares and Athena, to make the distinction between the negative and positive aspects as clear as possible. This might also be why Athena always came out on top during disagreements with her brother, to show that her wisdom and strategy were to be valued more than his strength and brute force. And that will do it for today's episode about Ares. Anyway, Solo fam, thank you so much for stopping by and watching this episode of Mythology Explained. I really appreciate you continuously showing up after all the time I've had to take off these past few months. I promise I'll be making it up to you with the content I've got planned for the rest of this year. If you wouldn't mind continuing to show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing if you haven't already, and sharing this video with someone you know would enjoy it, I'd be eternally grateful. Also, if you want to stay updated on what topics are coming up next, what I'm up to between videos, offer your own suggestions, or just say what's up, follow me on social media. Handles are on your screen now and links are down below. Just follow me. You'll be happy you did. I'll be seeing you Solo Cups next week with another episode of Mythology Explained. Until then, my name is John Solo, and remember, John shot first.